Hello and welcome to Living Your Yoga. I'm Melissa West, founder of the free weekly yoga video podcast Namaste Yoga, and now our brand new membership site for those who want to deepen their practice in a community of like-minded people. I'm so happy that you could join us today. Today I will be interviewing Sandra Garson. She is the author of Veggiyana, the Dharma of Cooking. She's also the author of How to Fix a Leak and Other Food from Your Farmer's Market, the new edition published in May of 2011. She's the founder and president of Veggiana, a charitable effort to feed Buddhist monastics and school children in India, Nepal, and Tibet. You can check out her websites at taste-right, as in taste, WRIGHT, .blogspot.com, and Veggiana, VEGGIYANA.org. Thank you for being with us here today, Sandy, and welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity, and hello to everyone.
I'd love to hear more about your Veggiana project. It's so fascinating.
It was just a spontaneous arising. I was in Nepal and I saw these beautiful children and how spindly they were and full of scratches and rashes. And I thought, all they need is a little food and a little love with that food. And it was a magical trick, because once we fed them, or I started to feed them, their health improved, their energy was there, their immune systems built up, and everything sort of shifted, and people became aware of that, and it was very exciting. And I've always believed in food, and I taught the children that food was love, and then they all fought over trying to feed Rinpoche when he came to the school. And now they fight to be in the class, and they all want to be in it, and it's been ongoing, and it's been really quite beautiful to see how we gave them strength, and how we moved the program to the monks and the nuns so that their bodies had the strength for them to fulfill their vows and their aspirations, because they were quite weak from not having enough proper food. And it's just made an enormous difference what you can do for peanuts. And so that's our kind of goal, is to give them people nourishment so they can fulfill their vows and their aspirations, and that is to end suffering. And food is a great way to end very unnecessary suffering.
Yeah, and you said, you made a joke there that's not really a joke. It's part of the cornerstone of your philosophy, isn't it, to this food for peanuts? Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I really believe that ordinary food has extraordinary power. And I did this on a extremely low budget. And peanuts are full of protein, and I saw them on the streets of Kathmandu, and they had a group for mentally disadvantaged people were grinding the peanuts into huge jars of peanut butter that they were selling to sustain themselves. And so it was a no-brainer to buy these large jars of peanut butter and take them to the children and the monks to start out with some protein on the bread they were eating. And even that made a bit of difference. So for very small efforts, you can get great rewards, and that was one of the things that we noticed here. Even popping corn, I saw it on the streets of Kathmandu, and I remembered that corn brings out the protein in beans, and the children weren't getting enough beans, and why not make the protein greater? And everybody loves popcorn. So at that time, for the equivalent of $16, I got 50 kilos of popcorn, and that was 7 snacks at the school. And we added salt, iodized salt, and we added a little ghee to put fat in, and everybody was happy. So that's it for peanuts and popcorn. You can do an awful lot.
Yeah, so that was quite ingenious then, to work with what you had around you and create, and those foods too, peanut butter and popcorn. I mean, that's great for kids, right? And adults.
It's great for kids and adults. And I notice even today at the school, they have a big bowl that sits outside all the time, and it's filled with popcorn, and the people who work there, the kids, everybody walks by and they take handfuls. And if it's not covered in grease, it's just plain popped corn, you're passing on, the ability for them to take the protein out of beans that they eat and have a good time at the same time.
That's so cool. Now, I know one of the things I saw this book in Chapters, which is our big bookstore up here in Canada. And so I was really attracted to, well, I was looking in the vegetarian section, and I was really attracted to the title, The Dharma of Cooking and 108 Easy, Delicious Vegetarian Recipes. So I was wondering if you could share with us why vegetarian?
Um, well, I was asked to do it that way because this is a Dharma book, and we started cooking at school with vegetarian because in many countries people are vegetarian for the cost, and also the quality of meat is a little iffy. So we were trying to avoid that. At the same time, shortly thereafter, His Holiness Karmapa told his monks that anyone who ate meat or had animals killed for their meat could no longer be part of his sangha. And he
Wow.
was reinstituting this no harming, and everyone was to be vegetarian. And so that posed a whole lot of new challenges for my particular work because the people who came out of Tibet were used to only eating meat,
Hmm.
and they didn't recognize vegetables. And so, as the Karmapa had said, you're in India and Nepal, we have lots of vegetables. So at that point, my job was I realized that the Tibetans went to the market, I followed them, and they didn't know what to do with the vegetables. And they didn't know how to cook them, they didn't know how to buy them, they didn't know really what they were. And so it was a question of educating people. And then I found the same was true here, particularly with my work on farmers markets,
Hmm.
that people are so used to convenience and processed foods, which are ultimately convenient, that they would go to a farmer's market and stare at a vegetable that they'd never seen before, a kohlrabi or a certain kind of squash. And they would say to the farmer over and over again, "What is this? What do I do with this?" I actually had a woman look at me 15 years ago when I was holding up a leek in the supermarket saying, "What is that nasty thing?" And
Well, you say this, but I finally, I'd seen these kohlrabis in the grocery store and at the farmer's market. And finally this summer, I said to the guy behind the stall at the farmer's market, I see these everywhere and I have no idea what they are, or what to do with them. And so he talked me into buying them, and we've been putting them in our stir fries ever since. And I love them.
exactly. And I had a German friend stay with me, and that's how I discovered them. And now I put them into into everything. So the farmers market book that I wrote was a way to educate people here. When you go to the market, this is what it is. This is how long it'll be there. This is all the things you can do with it. Its history in many cultures. And so it came out of both ends, working with people in this country and the children and monks in Nepal and India, this idea that vegetables were very powerful, and people were mostly afraid because they didn't know them. It was so easy
Mm.
to eat meat or processed food. So that's why vegetarian. And I tried to choose recipes too that were very vibrant on their own. I don't particularly like vegetarian recipes that are called tofu turkey or that
Mm.
remind us of our old habits. These
Mhm.
are very vibrant and recipes that stand on their own. And as I like to say, don't make you miss the meat.
Right. Yeah. I agree with that too.
And I think that that's where vegetarian cooking needs to move in that direction. That it's a beautiful, magnificent thing on its own,
Hmm.
and there's so many wonderful things and cooking styles that come from around the world that people have adapted, and that's what I'm trying to bring to people. So it
Hmm.
isn't scary, and it isn't tasteless, and it doesn't feel like handicap food.
Right. I don't know if you know of, we have a fabulous vegan cookbook author here in Canada. She's on the West Coast in British Columbia. Her name is Drina Burton, and she relies on legumes and nuts and seeds. And I really appreciate that about her, is that it's, straight up real food, not trying to pretend to be something else.
Yeah, that's it, and that also was part of my job in Nepal, was to introduce people. People don't like to change their diet. Food habits are the ones that die hardest. In fact, they don't die, and there's lots of evidence for that. And so the idea was that people will eat things that are familiar to them, and we just have to tweak them.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know, tweak them, and that's what this vegetarian cooking is also doing. We're tweaking people with their
Tweaking people. I got this image.
you know I get little tweaks on the plate, but yeah, that's what we're trying.
Well, let's get back to Veggiana. There are three interconnected realms that you speak of in Veggiana. Can you tell us about those?
Yes, the garden in alphabetical order: gardens, lessons, and meals. But it actually started with meals, and that was because the um, when I started cooking, when I saw the children and how difficult, how what difficult straits they seemed to be in, and I started cooking meals for them, and then I'd have to wait for me to come back another year and do more. And then I started educating the monks on, I realized I had to show the monks how to shop, which was to give kind of instant nutrition lessons and why this dal was better than that, and
Mm.
why you wanted salt with iodide in it and versus salt that didn't have it.
Mm.
And I realized that I was now giving lessons, and and then I realized that even when I left and the monks would buy the food, nobody knew often what to do with it.
Mm.
So I realized that I needed to teach the children how to do what I was doing so they could take it with them for life and go
Mhm.
out, and women, young girls, there would be women, they would have families, they needed to know this. I should share it. And the way to do that was we started classes in cooking
Mhm.
at the school. The day off at school there, they go to school 6 days a week, was Saturday. And so we started, 12 children came and cooked with me, and that was a big honor. And then they would make classes. And we had 4 Saturdays of the month. So we had 4 groups of 12, and they have it every year. And they do all the cooking. And we started to teach them with the monks who were shopping how to do the menu planning. And I would sit down with them and we would talk when I was there and email in between. And then I realized, chopping with the monks, that we were driving all over the Kathmandu Valley, even in dangerous times and times
Mm.
when gas was not there or very, very costly, sometimes driving an hour and a half to get food and drive it back and go through
Mhm.
political roadblocks and all kinds of difficulties, that they needed to have food close at hand.
Mm.
That this was absurd, particularly at the new monastery that had been purchased with lots of surrounding land full of local farmers.
Mm.
And so I went and I talked to my teacher and I said, you can't keep this up. We need to have food close at hand. And that brought on gardening.
Mm.
And we got the kids into composting. They got worms and they started composting, and they're growing little things in pots because the schoolyard's very crowded. Um, and but we did get the nuns, and now they're gardening, and we have beautiful pictures of them for the first time harvesting their own food. And we have a full-time gardener at the monastery in the countryside because it's too big and the monks are too busy. But
Wow.
now, so we're still teaching gardening, and we teach cooking, and those are the classes, and nutrition. I sat down with a bunch of young women who were teenagers and explained to them why they needed certain things in their diet as they went forward and how to have healthy babies. And then I wrote a little document for them that I hope to turn into a book called A is for Eyes, all about the vitamin alphabet. And
Mm.
so that's how it intertwines with the gardens, the lessons, and the meals. It's all they're all roots of the same tree.
Mhm.
Good health and nutrition.
It's just fantastic. It's so inspiring to hear about this. I mean, it must be just incredible for you to be involved in this.
I really, it's been the greatest joy. It's just joy, and to see the look on people's faces when they've been fed anywhere in the world, but here, when I remember about 9 years ago going out to this monastery, and I asked one of the monks what they needed most, and he said, we have no fruit. We
Mm.
never get fruit. So we did a small fundraiser and we got $100, and I went to the wholesale fruit market with one of the monks in a pickup truck, and we filled the back with apples, and I sent it out there. And I went the next day, and I was so startled. You would have thought the Dalai Lama arrived.
Really?
All the monks were there with the white scarves. They were bowing, because they had an apple.
Wow.
And that's when I realized that we had a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And now they have their own trees.
Now they have their own trees. That's good.
Yeah.
So I also love how it really just grew organically too, you know? It didn't for you it didn't start out as this big huge thing, I'm going to go save the monks and the children. It was just you speak about that at the beginning of your book, and I think it's important for people to hear because it was a very simple beginning.
Um, it is. If we talk in the Dharma about being awake, and about being aware. And so I I'm very tuned into food in all the things that it can do, and I have been. And when I got there and I just saw this that nobody saw, because it's not part of the monastery culture, and that nobody saw this, and I saw the suffering that it was causing, and I thought, this is so simple. This is so very simple. And at the time I just did it, and I realized later that it looked like I was mad. I was cooking in a kitchen that had no electricity and no floor. It was dirt, and the men were chopping on the dirt floor, and there
Oh
was
my
no,
God.
and yeah, and there was the stove was this mud pile of stones, and they had a big hole, and three men would shove a tree trunk in, and the flames would come from a hole in the top, and they would put the pot on it, and if I say less heat, they pulled the tree trunk out. And I thought, I was doing mantras all day to not be sick and not collapse and to make this
Wow.
work. And people said to me, "You're mad," and I thought, I must be, but I just knew that this was what to do. And so it is very simple. And if we all just look around,
Mm-hmm.
we can see, very very simple ways to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it just that it mushroomed, to use a food word. It's just so beautiful and makes me very happy. And we actually had great joy to know that Sokni Rinpoche, another Tibetan Lama, saw he saw our kids, and he wanted to know why they were so much healthier than the little monks that were in his care, why they had
Wow.
more energy. And he came to Rinpoche, and Rinpoche said, "Oh, ask Sandy." And so they came and asked for help.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very simple help. I said, give them peanut butter, give them popcorn, and we'll get there later. We'll
Right.
work out a plan. So I think for anybody, if you keep your eyes open and look around, at the simplest things in life are often the most powerful. And we
Yeah.
tend to not, we tend to look for something big, some
Yeah.
big bang, and that's why I say for peanuts, or everything does amount to a hill of beans.
Yeah. Well, that's why I did truly love your story. So I do appreciate you speaking about the simple beginnings and just acting on one need that you saw out of there, and then it's turned into this whole huge thing now.
I know it flabbergasts me, but I feel it's very real and joyous, and people can participate,
Yeah.
and people can probably look around wherever they are and see something very simple that can be fixed very easily, and from there big things come.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in the book too, you speak of that you even use in your title 108 delicious vegetarian recipes, and I feel like that kind of comes from your inspiration, which was His Holiness Karmapa's list of 108 ways to save the planet and green the earth. Do you want to tell us about maybe the significance of the 108 and the 108 ways to save the planet?
Well, 108 is a traditionally sacred number, and it adds up to nine. And there are 108 beads on a Buddhist mala, which is a rosary in some languages, and you do 108 prayers, or you do 108,000 prostrations, and so 108 seems to be a very magical, mystical number. And so His Holiness Karmapa, at the annual gathering of his monks called the Monlam, which means Big Prayer Festival, he's decided to reinstitute more discipline and more actually embodying the Buddha's teachings. And so he's starting every year to give talks to the monks and telling them that they have to renounce conveniences in the modern world and get back to more discipline and show compassion for the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And the earth supports all of us, and if it isn't here, all of us won't be here. And so he because 108 is a number where many Buddhists have lists, and things come out to 108. He gave a talk, and he posted 108 ways to help the environment. And I picked out from my website the ones that were pertinent to the Veggiana, because we were already doing them, and that made me also very, very proud that Rinpoche's monastery was leading the way. And among the things that Karmapa suggested were to stop eating meat. It's not productive, and it costs more to produce the meat, and harm, and to be vegetarian. And he also said, if you're making offerings, offerings to a monastery, bring plants, bring trees, bring
Mm.
food. Don't bring trinkets.
Mm.
It's not helping anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But be conscious of this. And he suggested to the monastics that they compost, that they grow vegetables close to the monastery as possible, that they plant trees, and that they keep the earth clean by not using too much water, by being very conscious of how they are dealing with the environment. And I was very taken with that, and particularly because there were so many things on that list um, that were very pertinent to what we were trying to do.
Mm.
He also told them to collect rainwater,
Mm.
and that's one of the things we're trying to do right now for using the irrigating the garden
Mm-hmm.
instead of using the wells, because there's a water shortage. We're working on collecting rainwater. So there, if you just Google Karmapa, you'll see. And he just gave another major talk on the
Mm-hmm.
environment. So and vegetarianism and so forth. So I just wanted to bring all that to everyone's attention as
Yeah.
part of what we try to do, because it's not just eating vegetables, it's preserving the earth that they're grown in and that we live in.
Yeah, there's a greater philosophy tied to it. And I love how you bring that out in your book through the stories you tell, and the wisdom of food. Um, I haven't read all the way through the book yet, but you know, this one story that really touched me was the story of the edible truth of suffering. It gave me hope, you know.
It,
Can,
it gave me a lot of hope. I kind of figured that story out myself, and I do love it. And that I lived for 30 years in the great state of Maine, and my heart still does live there often. And it's a cold, stony, rocky place, as we know, and the winters are quite long, 7 to 8 months, and
mm-hmm.
they have a very short growing season. And but what grows there has the most intense flavors that I had ever had, and I became a huge fan of this food long before people were foodies in Portland, Maine. And my friend Sam Hayward, who is the big 5-star chef, many years ago went out to he was becoming famous, and he was sent out on a James Beard um, expedition to California to cook at a cook-off in a big winery. And the big winery in Sonoma County here in California had huge vegetable beds. They were picture perfect. They were part of a tour when you did wineries, the vegetable beds. And they told Sam to make his signature dish at this cook-off.
Mm-hmm.
And so he tried. And he came back and he said, I kept going to the garden to get more vegetables and more vegetables. They were so beautiful. He said, but they had no taste. I couldn't get the taste in the pot.
Wow.
And he was quite upset with himself. And he came back to Maine, and he went to see this farmer who was growing things for him, just for him, and in a very strange, in a mill town. It wasn't even in a fancy place. It was in a mill town nearby. And he went to see Frank, whose last name I forget. And he said, Frank, give me this, this, and this. This was exactly the amount of vegetables that he had first picked in California. And he went back to his house and he made the dish. And there it was. There was everything, the flavor, the fullness, the vitality was all in this dish. And he couldn't figure out what had happened. And he sat down with Frank, and they thought about it and thought about it. And finally, they realized that it was the hard life in Maine that these vegetables had to endure that made them, and that would be a very short and erratic growing season that can be very cold or very hot, very wet or very dry, breeding different kinds of insects and fungus. And it can be very short season, or it can stretch out. We never know in the state of Maine what the weather is going to be. And it was this factor that led these vegetables to survive. They had to put out all their hormones and all their chemicals to keep off the bugs, to grow faster, grow slower, whatever it was. And in all those chemicals and hormones inside the plant was the flavor. And so it was the hardship, it was the suffering that put the flavor in the vegetables. And in the picture perfect California, where everything was easy and the soil was irrigated and the weather was constant, they didn't have to do anything, and they were picture perfect and they looked pretty. And so it became for me the truth of suffering, that made us all a little more delicious as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a couple years later, I was up in Sonoma County, California, and I made a pilgrimage to a winery that is very, very small, and it's very famous for producing probably the best Zinfandel in this country, and it's legendary how you can't get any because they don't make enough. And on the door of the winery, it said one bottle to a group. And it was a cold, rainy February. There was no grapes out. There was no wine tours going on. And I just knocked on the door. And the owner himself came out and he showed me his vats. And I said to him, just because it was bothering me, how is it that you, around all these people around you, are producing the same Zinfandel, but yours is so famous for being so delicious? And he said, oh, that's easy. I'm the only one here who doesn't irrigate my grapes. I make them fight. I make them suffer. I make them fight to live, and that puts all the flavor in them. And he said, I really believe that. And I looked at him, and the light bulb went off, and I said, that's exactly what the chef Sam Hayward told me about our vegetables in Maine. And I told him this story, and he handed me 3 bottles of wine. And so I just love it that there's great truth to this fact that all of our sufferings are what really make us strong and delicious and tasty people.
I love that. I just love that story. What's your favorite story from the book?
Yeah. I love them all. I've always been fond of the fact that food unites us in the world. And so when I did this press trip with communists who weren't allowed to talk to us, that I was able to break the barriers by asking a Hungarian man whether his mother or he put sausage in a Hungarian dish called lecho. And I love the story of how the Veggiana started, very, very much. And I love the story of how I discovered sesame seeds were so valuable that I could feed the nuns and stop the malnutrition and their fainting. I love them all.
Yeah, I love that sesame seed story too, and I love that little part that you put how they sit like the sesame seeds sit like jewels even on the top of McDonald's hamburgers.
Yeah, that's what they've been reduced to in our society.
Unfortunately.
I also, maybe you didn't, I do very much love the story of the cab driver in Kathmandu who gave me his day and his cab and never charged me when he found out I was making carrot pudding for the children.
Wow.
And I have that story of how he picked me up and he was quite grumpy and he asked me where I wanted to go, and I said Chahabia, which was a section the monks had taken me shopping, and I didn't know more than that. And he's driving through the streets in this tiny car and the meter's on and he's quite grumpy, and he turns and he said, where? And I said to him, anywhere you can get garages. I want garages. And he's looking at me over his shoulder like, what garages? And finally I try to explain to him in my broken English that I think he turns around and he says gajar. I had the syllables backwards. Garage, gajar, and gajar means carrot in Nepali and Hindi. And I said I wanted carrots pointed to the eyes, told him I had children who needed better eyes. I was making this gajar halua, carrot pudding, which is a very beloved Nepali dish. At which point he slammed on the brakes and I fell on the floor, and he turned off the meter and he did a U-turn and zoomed at high speed. We were 45 minutes in the car and I thought I was being kidnapped. I had no idea what was happening to me because he kept looking at me in the rearview mirror, And it ended up that he took me to the wholesale, this is how I found it, the wholesale vegetable depot of Kathmandu.
Nice.
And when we got there, he said, you stay here, meat cheaper. And he went in and bought these 10 kilos of carrots. And then he drove me all over the valley and took me back to the school, and he never put on the meter.
Wow. That's amazing. Great.
So
this book is full of great stories like that. It's like, I love reading cookbooks, but this is actually a cookbook that you can read.
That's what I hope, yeah.
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 It's fantastic that way. Well, I'd also, we need to finish up now, but I was wondering if you could share your favorite recipe in the book as well before we close off.
they're all mine for a long time. I love the Egyptian fool, which I make quite a lot, and you can make out of a can in 2 minutes. The split peas with kale. Everybody loves the date bars. Every time I take them
Mm.
places, people go absolutely. Oh, I gotta have the recipe. Oh, I gotta make that. For surprise, the Persian celery stew. I did that at a cooking
Mm.
demonstration. People were stunned that celery itself could be so fabulous. So I love that for that particular reason. Um, um,
That's great. It's a
is that
great
is it?
list. That's a
Yeah,
great list.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love this. And the kale with split peas and cinnamon has become my most favorite comfort food this winter.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very flavorful.
So, what words of wisdom would you like to leave with our listeners and viewers, Sandra?
Um, Remember that to reach your dreams and aspirations, you need a strong body. And if you
Mm.
love people and you want them to do well, don't feed them junk.
Mm-hmm.
You fuel their bodies with the right thing and look around you and look for the simple things and the basics, and everything comes out okay.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for being with us today, Sandra. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with you.
I'm very grateful. Thank you so much for letting me share the love that is food and my love of food.
You're so very welcome. I want to thank everybody else for watching today. I also encourage you to go to my website at melissawest.com. If you go there, you can sign up for my newsletter and get a free morning and evening yoga sequence. And also, you can join our Facebook community at facebook.com/livingyouryoga. And Sandra, do you want to say your websites again for us too, please?
Oh, surely. If you want to read about the Veggiyana and see pictures of the children and the nuns, it's Veggiana, VEGGIYANA.org. And I write a farmers market blog at Taste Right, TASTEWRIGHT
Fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you so much. And thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for watching Living Your Yoga. Thank you to Sandra for joining us. And may the rising sun bless your heart with joy, and may the setting sun bless your mind with peace. Namaste.
You've been enjoying Living Your Yoga with your host, Dr. Melissa West. For more information and or to contact Melissa, visit www.livingyouryoga.ca. Namaste.